This video was made in association with KnifeInformer.com. Head on over to Knife Informer for all of your blade-related needs, including reviews, comparisons, stats, and more. What is up, everybody, and welcome. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at this Peter Rassenti Satori. I am super excited to have this knife on the table today. Rassenti's work is something that, I've been interested in for a while. I got to try out 4 Satoris when I was in New York, but I had a very, very brief stint with them at Peter's table. So the fact that I've been able to hold on to this knife for a couple weeks and carry it has been quite a treat. So before we go ahead and jump into the features and flaws, let's take a quick look at some of these stats. The overall length on this Satori is 8.5 inches. The weight is 5.96 ounces. You'll see it's a fairly thick blade stock, and it is an integral as well. So a lot of extra weight in there, even though it's just an 8.5 inch knife. There is no pocketing on the inside. Being an integral and everything, that would be probably impossible to do. Yeah, so a little bit weighty at almost 6 ounces. Now we'll take a quick look at a size comparison. Here it is up against the Rat 2 and the PM2. It's a terrible flick. So you can see it is a fairly large knife, dwarfing the PM2 in almost every respect, and it has a very dominant blade. That is absolutely for sure. So let's go ahead and talk about the features and flaws, the first of which is just going to be a general overview of the materials and sort of a showcase. So I'm just going to grab this cloth here, give it a quick little polish. And we'll take a look at this really sick Damasteel etch. Look at that insane grind. The milled pockets in the titanium. Inside of the integral handle, the reverse side, see a 45-degree chamfer. We do have a Damasteel clip as well. Crazy tight pattern here on the clip. Overall, a fairly plain knife. I'm not sure about the screws. I believe they're probably just blackened titanium, but I could be wrong about that. And then we do have these titanium pins here. This is an external stop pin for, I believe, the closed position as well as the open position. You can see overall, pretty sweet design. So let's go ahead and talk about the ergonomics. Now, when sort of saber gripping the knife, it's sort of a perfect fit. There isn't really too much room to go wrong here with a fairly standard handle shape. You can see it does sort of, taper quite a bit towards the end here, but being a fairly large handle, I'm about a medium glove. You can see there's plenty of space on the end here to serve either a larger hand or just, to insinuate the fact that this doesn't cause too much trouble because it's just further down the knife. We have some pretty well-placed jimping up here on the blade spine. Now, in terms of its usefulness, it's pretty well separated in the sense that, there's quite a bit of distance in between each ridge. So it does provide grippiness when you really bear down on it. It's got enough sharpness to it there, but I don't know. It's not the most amazing. What it would be better for is with a glove. And I almost imagine that if you were buying one of these knives as a user, because of its size and everything, you might be wearing a glove. In which case, I think this jimping is going to serve you quite well. But in terms of this choil here, Now, when I first saw the Satori, I certainly felt that this would be a finger choil, and my finger doesn't really fit in there. I mean, I'm like, I don't know if you can see, it's sort of like cutting into my finger right here on the tip. I mean, I'm barely able to fit in there, and it's not comfortable. You can see with just the tip of my index finger, I sort of fill the entire choil. Now, the owner of this knife, which, by the way, this knife is on loan from my friend Josh. Thank you, Josh. That's a.k.a. Echo Does Knives on Instagram. Now, Josh says and showed me that his finger indeed fits in the finger choil. So if you have tiny little fingers, little pencil fingers, then you perhaps are well served there. But I really dislike it when a maker sort of rides the line between potential finger choil and just a generic sharpening choil, because like I really feel like my finger should be able to go here, and for me personally, it can't. And so in that sense, I feel a little bit misled. I wish he would either just make it larger so that it was more obviously a finger choil for any owner, or just sort of taper it back so that it's not as inviting as you might think it is. In terms of the clip functions fairly well. You can see here there's quite a bit of flat space where it's making contact. This does make it something that you really have to kind of push it into your pants just because there's so much friction. You have the tension of the damn steel clip itself, but because there's so much surface area on both sides between the clip and the frame, that's just added friction. So it's not difficult to get in the pocket by any means, but it definitely, you kind of got to shove it in there, which is fine. It's definitely going to function in a utilitarian way. It is a little bit slim. I imagine if you have thicker jeans, you could have to maybe lift this clip or figure it out otherwise. It is sitting fairly close to the knife. Now, in terms of the action, we, of course, will talk about this separated into two different sections, first being the deployment. And the deployment on this knife, it's a thick blade. I measured this blade stock at, I think, about 0.18. Maybe it's 0.19. I know that my Bushido here is 0.19, and you can see they're fairly equally sized. And so when you get a super thick blade like this, it's important to have a detent that can support that blade's weight on deployment. So you'll see here, if I really whip the flipper tab, I'm able to get really solid, really commanding deployment. On the flip side, it's really not hard to fail deployment, at all. So it's a heavy blade. The detent's fairly well tuned. It could be tuned ever so slightly better, or he could have just maybe not gone with such a thick blade stock. I don't really know. Of course, this is all sort of like getting into personal preference land. I don't know. Something about this knife, I just feel like he could have provided a snappier detent. If we take a look at another knife, this crazy motherfucker, it's always interesting saying his name, this CMF knife, this Crusade, also has a 0.19 inch thick blade stock, and you can see it flips a lot better with a lighter tug, just because the detent seems to be set out a little bit more, which gives it a little bit more snappiness. And I don't feel as concerned when I pull the flipper tab on the Crusade. I can really pull it any way I want with any strength that I want, and I'm always getting deployment here. And this is basically, it's a little bit bigger in terms of overall size, similar thickness, of course, but the detent is sat in a little bit further, and I'm just not super sure how much I like it, to be frank. However, in addition to that, I suppose I should say, there's no chamfering here on these edges around the flipper tab at all. Very, very sharp. Now, I think that when, somebody's interested in Peter's work, they're interested in it for the reason that it's very precise, it's machined. I think that that's the draw to his work, and so these things that I'm pointing out as, flaws or whatever, are probably not flaws to the people that are owning his knives. So yeah, ultimately the deployment is solid, but it could be ever so slightly more well-tuned in my opinion. In terms of closing, it's an absolute guillotine. Obviously, Peter makes a super smooth knife. Everything fits incredibly well, and it just, the weight of that blade absolutely drops. I mean, you can't get anything other than this sort of closing action on it. It's just an absolute total guillotine. Now let's go ahead and talk about the blade. Obviously, we are looking at a Damasteel blade here, and I really just want to show you guys this grind another time. I really love the shape of the Satori blade. So you can see here we sort of have a ramp where the jimping is, but then it sort of dips back down and up into another ramp right here. And then it sort of comes straight down and into this really wicked wide front belly into a slight recurve. You can see these crazy huge grinds, this transition right here to this front grind. The huge swedge, the gorgeous flat. I mean, look at this thing. Obviously, it is hollow ground. Spectacular. The knife, I must say, is intensely sharp. Now, I know that the current owner, Josh, does not really carry his knives and hasn't done much with this knife, but the previous owner did carry it, so I don't know. It doesn't appear to have ever been sharpened, but I'm not an expert. I couldn't tell you for sure. I will say that I've used this knife to open some pretty serious packages, and it is dominantly sharp. I mean, I used it to open one of those, plastic envelopes where if it gets folded over and you sort of try to slice through it, it gets bunched up. This thing just like a razor blade straight through. It was absolutely incredible. So I'm super impressed with this blade overall. One little miscellaneous thing that's worth pointing out. I always love this about Rassenti's work. He puts his little signature right here in the relief cut. Here, I'll just force it. There you go. It's a nice little detail that I like on an otherwise, not non-branded knife. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Of course, if you'd like to see beautiful pictures of this knife or any of these other knives you see here on the table, you can follow me on Instagram at tovarishworks. If you'd like to reach out to me for any reason whatsoever, you can do so by emailing me at tovarishworks@gmail.com. And if you've made it all the way to the very, very end of this video, I will let you in on a little sneak peek announcement. This Mammoth Molar pen here that you see is going to be given away on the channel soon in association with African Custom Knives. So definitely stay tuned and subscribe if you're interested in that. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.